Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. The cash returns of Anglo-American's Kumba Iron Ore to its black shareholding since Kumba's listing on the JSE in 2006 has risen to 23.5 billion rand, while also lending a helping hand to juniors. Mining Weekly editor Martin Creamer tells us more. Welcome, Martin.
Thanks, Shannon.
Kumba's subsidiary Sishen Iron Ore Company has returned some 1.8 billion rand to its BEE entities in 2014. But this this is unique in the mining industry. How did they do that?
You know, this is an incredible amount of money. If you look about the 23.5 billion, that's more than we paid for the 10 soccer stadiums, you know, for the World Cup. So we're talking about an enormous amount of money, and this is generated from the soil of the Northern Cape, from that iron ore there. It's very high quality iron ore. That used to be state owned. And I can remember driving to Pretoria 2005 and going to interview the people in charge of what was then Kumba Resources, because the nationalized ISCO had already unbundled, and ArcelorMittal had taken the steel side, and the mining side was under the name of Kumba Resources. But in that Kumba Resources was also coal and a whole lot of mineral sands and a lot of other activities within that. But Anglo-American was keen to get the iron ore side of it. And the iron ore side then was unbundled out, and it became Kumba Iron Ore. And that was done by Dr. Konfakonia and Sipho and Cozy. They were there thinking this out. I mean, I don't think in their wildest dreams they could have imagined that this would be the outcome, because not only have you got this fantastically robust Kumba Iron Ore, which even during these hard times, you know, can pay out this 1.8 billion, but you've also got now Exxaro. Now, for Anglo-American to earn its BEE spurs, it needed a black-controlled company. So Exxaro is the black-controlled company, 55% black-owned. So that could confer BEE status on Kumba. And so, but it wasn't done for nothing. Exxaro then got 20% of Kumba. So you had that flow into Exxaro. Then to make up the 26%, so as long ago as 2006, they had already got the mining charter ownership sorted out, 26%, because the company involved is Sishen Iron Ore Company, SIOC. And the ownership of that is 20% Exxaro, which gets this massive flow. So they got like 1.4 billion of the 1.8. The community has another 3% of that. And the employees have a 3%. So we've seen the employees become half millionaires in November. We've seen the community become butchers, bakers, candlestick makers, and have all sorts of community activities and education and early child development. I mean, when you go out there, you know, the mind boggles. I've been out at the early stage, but they say I should go out now. Because, you know, there's also been a lot of housing development, and a lot of those employees actually used that 576,000 cash to do things. Some of them become sheep farmers and all sorts of things. So it's been a very interesting flow of money into that community through the SIOC Community Development Trust, and then through the employee ESOP. So it's a complicated setup, and it was, you know, Dr. Konfakonia and Sipho and Cozy, you've got to give them credit, in those early days thought this all out. And now it's just self-generating, you know, and it's non-stopping, because you could hear Kumba Iron Ore say, no, you know, people must be paid dividends. That's our sort of selling proposition to our investors. So even though times were quite tight, you still saw them going ahead, you know, paying this dividend and saying we're going to continue to do it. So mining is not that well placed at the moment in terms of the iron ore price and everything, but still you can see that they're committed to their shareholders.
How well placed are Kumba in terms of compliance with the mining charter?
Well, according to their CEO, they're better placed than anybody, because not only have they got the ownership right, and that was, you know, it's been right for the last 8 years, but they also do a lot of procurement from black companies, and from a employee equity point of view, their management is overwhelmingly beyond the compliance level in terms of historically disadvantaged South Africans in that Northern Cape. So it just shows you how much, you know, ore in the ground and metal and mineral in the ground can do for a country and a province like like the Northern Cape, where this money is just floating and still the cash is still gushing. You know, in the 6 months they generated 16 billion rands worth of cash. This is supposed to be at a time when they're not doing so well. And looking forward now, they do think the price might lift towards in the last quarter. So who knows what's going to happen. But they are determined to keep this pace up. And when you look at the longevity of the mines, Sishen alone has got at least another 19 years. The new Columella has got, even now before the additional exploration, 25 years. You know, even in Tabazimbi and Limpopo, because it's not only Northern Cape, they also do the same in Tabazimbi in the Limpopo area. That is being reconfigured to be a low-cost mine for the next 10 years, and I'm sure it'll go on beyond that. And they're recovering a lot of the waste that's on dumps.
Now, Kumba Iron Ore is lending a helping hand to up-and-coming junior BE iron ore miners in the Northern Cape and Limpopo, as you mentioned. Tell us about that.
Yeah, this was a surprise package there, because we had the whole presentation, and Norman Mbazima, I think, was surprised when one of the mining analysts from the floor, Tim Clark, Standard Bank, said, could you tell us about, you know, the amount of iron ore that you procure from up-and-coming, emerging, black economic empowered iron ore juniors? And I think it took everybody surprised, because it wasn't really on the agenda. But it was, I'm very grateful that it came out, because then he started saying, gee, you know, we should be mentioning these things, and we see it as an obligation to build small business. And there are a lot of small entrepreneurial type activities that are junior black emerging miners, and we see it as an obligation to help them, which is a great attitude to have, because we've seen in places like Australia that there has been a bit of angst between the smaller players, because they become irritants. And we saw that the government had to sort of regulate on the rail, because they wouldn't even allow new companies to come onto their rail, you know, some of the big giants, because they had built these railway lines. They don't want these little irritants coming on.
They don't want to share.
Yeah, and they don't want to share. But here you see this attitude of, we really want you to succeed. Let's help you. And we can see that it's difficult, you know, to put your iron ore on a train using a front-end loader. You let us use our system to get it on. And at this stage, it's still small numbers in terms of the volume. But I think the creation of these small businesses is key. And everyone in South Africa should be pushing some entrepreneurial thing. And what better way to do it than try and create a constellation of small miners and saying it's an obligation, says Norman Mbazima. So hopefully these guys will succeed, because he says it's an obligation to see that they succeed, they're successful.
Tell us about the investment outlook for iron ore generally, and perhaps Kumba specifically. Yeah,
well, they've overdone it with iron ore. You know, the Australians have been huge investors, and you can see their production levels were at record height even now. And the Brazilians have not just been as active, but they've also produced 8% more. The Australians, I think, produced 25% more. The South Africans have got the best leeway, because we only produced about 3% more, and there's a lot of scope to grow. So they're looking to, with minimal capital investment, getting maximum return, because it'll be brownfield activities where they look at, and to get to the 50 million tonnes and beyond, by 2016, they're well placed to do that. So with minimum investment, in this time when the price is down, they can get a good return. And they also have got lumpy ore, which normally fetches a premium. During this period of oversupply, when the price dropped to $93 an ounce, you could see that the premium they normally get for having what they call lumpy ore, it's high quality ore, that just fell away and disappeared. But suddenly it's building back, and they do benefit quite a lot from it. So I think they're well placed to invest moderately, even though other people might be pulling in their horns, because they've probably overdone it in Australia and overdone it in Brazil. We can still put our foot flat on the accelerator and go crazy and get Transnet, you know, to help the country to export more, which brings in that absolutely vital foreign exchange, so that our rand keeps strong and we don't fall too much. But of course, rand weakness did help Kumba. You know, the rand weakness does suddenly lift your revenue, and we saw them with record revenue in rand terms. So it's a two-edged thing there. It does help the exports.
Well, thank you very much, Martin.
It's a great pleasure, Shannon.
That's it for today. Join us again next week for more news analysis on South Africa's mining industry.